these esteemed guests here, one of whom is a filmmaker on one of the films that you saw tonight. And let's just dive in because we're a little bit, I want to hear what they have to say. Storytelling has power, and we've just seen some films that are pretty impactful and hard hitting, and maybe bring up subjects that are taboo and hard sometimes to hear. And there's power there, and there are things that will stick with all of us. You are a fellow Trojan, and you made the film that you made, Code Red, with humor and taboo busting and all of the rest. What was the inspiration for you, and what was your why in making that film?
First of all, I want to say thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm very excited to be here. And well, basically the main idea for our film Code Red was that we wanted to make it a conversation in something that we could just say every day, because let's be honest, as girls and women, and we have our periods, and most of the time we don't talk about it because we feel embarrassed, or we're like, oh, we don't want to talk about a pad, or we always like, check me in the back or something. But we were all wanted to have fun with this project, but we also wanted to transmit our message, which was just to not be scared for young girls or anyone that menstruates to be able to have resources or ask for a pad. It's
Were you in that costume?
Yes, that was me. I was the vulva.
That was like a whole other, it wasn't just talking about it.
Oh yes, definitely. That was the whole integrated in there. We were like, we wanted to make it like something that grabbed the attention of people. Mainly because we were doing on-street interviews, and that definitely did the trick.
Yeah, like they were there, what, or I think
yes.
it's sort of instantaneous, like.
Oh yes, they were like following us at some point. They were like, what are you guys doing? And we were like, oh, do you want to be part of it? And that's honestly how we got a lot of the interviews.
And I will ask at the way other end, you are a Jack, a trans advocate and sexual wellness educator, and also work with We Testify. We just saw Renee from We Testify in the last film. So, whose stories get told, how stories get told, the importance of storytelling. Where do I begin? How do you approach your work as a storyteller?
I feel, oh wait, I have to turn this on. Better, there we go. There's a lot of lack of representation of transgender non-conforming people in these conversations, as we saw. Sometimes we get a slide or a footnote, but that's about it. Cisgender people are severely ill-equipped to talk about the trans experience. And so that's why it's so important to invite us into the room. Thank you, by the way. So I approach my work with transparency. It became pretty clear to me that as a trans person of color who had an abortion, I became the taboo subject. So when I started talking about my abortion, I had so many people approach me, email me, DM me saying, thank you so much for your candor, thank you so much for being visible. I didn't know that there was anybody else out here who's experienced this who isn't a cisgender woman. So it became very clear to me that I was gonna have to keep talking about my abortion. So I'm so proud to do the work I do. That is my why. The lack of representation is my why. It becomes healing for me because it heals other people.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I mean, I think about the importance of the importance of taboo busting, but also just continuing to expand the conversation. And I have a non-binary kid, and I think about just navigating period products and being in the bathroom and whose bathroom they're in and all that stuff. And it's very tricky sometimes, and we just have to talk about it. We just have to put a light on it and talk about it and bring everybody into the conversation. We've also had films from a global perspective here, obviously, that are incredibly important, and we're all, we're lifting all tides by having these conversations that impact all of us. But bringing it very close to home to Los Angeles, Gabrielle, love to hear from you about your work with Black Women for Wellness, and what are the current challenges right now affecting Black mothers and birthing people here in Los Angeles, and why is it important to elevate Black mothers and birthing people's voices, stories, and histories?
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me. First, I would like to speak to Black Women for Wellness, which is the organization that I work for. We are a nonprofit reproductive justice organization based in Leimert Park in South LA. We are committed to improving the overall health status of Black women and girls, and we do so through health education, self-empowerment, and advocacy. I specifically lead our maternal and infant health program, and so I use programming and policy to bring attention to the disproportionate rates of Black maternal and infant mortality in LA County. Currently in the state of California, Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications compared to white women. And we attribute that to systemic racism, implicit bias, and a trend that we are noticing is the closure of maternity care centers throughout the nation, but specifically in LA County. And so I would love to speak to the work that we're doing to sort of combat implicit bias. Part of my work is to work to empower women so that they're informed and that they can make decisions in regard to their birthing experience and birthing journey. So I'm hosting programs in the community. I've hosted birthing rights workshops, connecting Black mothers and Black birthing people in LA County, connecting them with legal aid and legal advocates who can help support them so that folks are really understanding the rights that they have, right? But speaking to policy, currently I am leading the work on a piece of legislation, Assembly Bill 2319, which is called the Strengthening the California Dignity in Pregnancy and Childbirth Act. Right now we are working to hold healthcare providers and facilities accountable. There's currently a law in place that requires that providers in the state of California, they are required to take an implicit bias training every 2 years. And upon an investigation that the Department of Justice conducted, they found that 80% of providers and facilities in the state of California were not compliant in taking that implicit bias training. And so AB 2319 is working to, it'll work as a cleanup bill, and it'll work to hold healthcare providers and facilities accountable via fines, via enforcement, regulation, and all of those things to ensure that providers are taking implicit bias training, but they're taking it seriously. And quickly, I want to touch on maternity care center closures. We're also working on a piece of legislation, AB 1895. As I mentioned, we are seeing this trend of the closure of maternity care centers. Most recently, Sentinel Hospital in Inglewood removed their maternity care services in October of last year. This is due to a Black woman dying during childbirth, which then prompted a federal investigation. They were found to be negligent and fined, and opposed to, working to improve the services that they offered to community members, right? Instead of offering training and intensive structure for their maternity, labor and delivery department, they just decided that they were tired of it and they were gonna remove their services for the community. A community that already is experiencing these high rates of maternal mortality, various health disparities, and now someone who is living in the Inglewood area and wants to access maternity care services, they have to go at least 10 miles away to access care. We live in LA, right? So you can imagine how long that will take, and imagine someone who doesn't have access to reliable transportation. A pregnant woman, has to get on the bus to access care in LA. And so really we're working on the programming side so that folks are aware of these barriers and the data around these health disparities, but we're also working on the policy side as well to ensure that laws are in place that ultimately support Black mothers, birthing people, and Black families throughout the state. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your work. Senait, you are also working here in Los Angeles with the African Communities Health Coalition. So you see both local issues, but also in a larger global context. So could you please tell the audience about your African-centered approach to mental health care and service delivery, and what are the most urgent concerns you're seeing now here with your community in Los Angeles?
Thank you. At first, I just wanted to brief you guys after to this film. I feel like it's really important to be here, to be the voice, and so thank you to invite me for this. This is more than one can imagine what's going on everywhere, just being a woman. Doesn't matter which continent and which country and ethnicity. Second, ours is a little bit different when I say ours. I'm the first immigrant coming from Ethiopia, so here we don't have anything that advocate and be the voice for the migrant from Africa. As you see, most of the issues tends to be in Africa. So that's how we founded this organization, mainly in response to mental health issue within African community and also Caribbean diaspora. From that on, we just move forward. We have different services. One of the services, immigration is one of the issues that leads to mental illness. The other one is gender-based violence within the community. That's where we focus. And so happened we're very courageous group. I have my chair here at Thea from South Africa. I'm a vice chair of the group, the task force called FGM Task Force, the Greater Los Angeles FGM. That's because FGM, as you saw it in the film, it's a taboo. Not only that, here in the United States, there's misunderstanding what it means coming from Africa or from any other cultural background. FGM tends to be a criminal code, like a penal code for if you would anyone practice here in the United States. There's going to be a punishment, 10 years imprisonment, right? So because of that, we have to get involved. We have to provide prevention before punishment. And that's why we came up to be a group, this task force. We've been dealing with Department of Homeland Security. I say that because usually they are the agents from the entrance, the airport, pulling people coming most likely hijab, Muslim countries or Africa. Sometimes it could be negative profiling, pull them on the side, asking the girls if they have been circumcised or cut. And this is like U.S. citizens when they go back home for holiday. So they ask us to do this kind of, who's the practice, but we advocate, be the voice. I'm a woman, why would I even have to be a choice between the culture I live with for how many years? Which the film show, to be a woman in Africa or some other country who does practice, she has no choice but being that little girl. She's not gonna get married and she's not gonna get no money, so that's a choice I had to live with. So don't tell me how to live my life just because I came from the outside and you're gonna, jail me or something. That's how we step up and start asking prevention education instead of punishment. Since then, we work so hard closely with religious groups such as mosques and churches, community leaders, and also we have given to Department of Homeland Security agents, such as the airport officers, how to approach and from cultural perspective Matter of fact, we're scheduled next week, right? On the 15th, we're gonna be educating another group agencies. So to say that, we not only focus on FGM, there's early marriage issues. Some of you your experiences how affect a woman or young girl to marry someone who doesn't know not only that age level, physically and mentally. The other one is human trafficking. There's sex slaves in here in our city. Those are the kind of things we advocate, be the voice. We partner with a lot of organizations and public and private agencies. So the work is a long way, but if we change one thing out of anything, that's a better way to do it. There's a lot of policy you have to work, has to be implemented in some countries like Kenya, Ethiopia, for example, FGM, but we do have others can't even talk about the issue of gender-based violence, including FGM and early marriage. Those are the kind of advocacy we're working on.
And Tracy, you are also doing this work within gender health. So as a global organization based in the United States, with a commitment to advancing sexual and reproductive health and rights and gender equality, how do you see the current U.S. policy impacting the rest of the world?
All right, Tracy, I heard your question.
Yes.
Before I answer it, I think it's important for folks to know that Tracy Destragos is also a filmmaker, and with our friend and colleague and participant Francine Coito made the movie about Plan C, which is one of the major efforts to make medication abortion available by mail to people in the U.S., including in red states. And on Friday, they are flying to New York because they've been nominated for a Webby Award for Plan C. So let's just pause on this.
Thank you.
Okay, but I did hear your question.
Yes.
So, it's interesting because the films we saw, some took place in Africa, some were filmed in the US, including here in Los Angeles. But we see each of these issues in every place. Gender Health works to improve the respect given to women, to pregnant people during maternity care. We saw the first film about maternal mortality and the challenges of just prenatal care and delivery in a number of countries in Africa. We work to make the care more respectful, safer. I've been traveling to dozens of countries in Africa for 29 years, and there are plenty of hospitals across the continent where I would have been happy to birth my babies. There are also places where it's incredibly dangerous to be pregnant at any stage of pregnancy. And what we aim to do is to lift that up, improve the quality of care, so no one who is birthing is putting themselves at risk. We work on menstrual health and destigmatizing periods and making sure that people have access to period products. One of our partners is a young woman who pretty much single-handedly has made sure that women who are in jails and prisons in Abidjan, in Côte d'Ivoire, West Africa, have access to period products. Before she started that effort, they didn't. Each thing we do, whether we're working to address female genital cutting, we're doing it with our local partners. The we here, I'm sitting here, I grew up just south of here in Orange County. I'm a very small part of the we. 85% of our staff are based in the countries where we work. Our staff in Ethiopia are Ethiopian, our staff in Nigeria are Nigerian. So the we is people of and from and within these cultures doing this work with our local partners and governments, medical professionals. And one of the things that makes their work is the great partnerships we can have across the issues we're dealing with and across organizations. One of the things that makes their work harder is when U.S. foreign policy and U.S. policy goes off the rails. The Dobbs decision, the Supreme Court decision that overturned Roe v. Wade and removed our theoretical constitutional right to abortion in this country, is perceived in many places around the world as foreign policy. I mean, it's in the news, so it must have something to do with the rest of the world. We know it's domestic policy, but there's enormous conflation between what actually happens in the US and what really is relevant in other places. And some of that is because a lot of foreign assistance funding comes from the US, and some of that is because a lot of the funding for the opposition comes from the US. The anti-choice movement, the anti-LGBTQ movement, the anti-sex education movement are all intricately connected and very much US funded. So, we like to say like nothing about us without us. We also have to recognize that in the US sometimes what we're doing as a country, not those of us here or those of you here, but what our country does is often at odds with what we say our values are, and really the commitment that I know everyone in this room holds to respect the rights, the health, access, equality for all people. So we're quite a woven web, and thrilled to be here with folks who are working on really important pieces of that web.
I want to be mindful of cut off the applause, but everyone's time. We want to open it up if there are any questions, and then we'll have sort of a brief call to action from everyone here before we let you get home. But if there are any questions, we'd love to open it up to time for you all. Any questions? Anyone? For any of the panelists here? David.
I asked the question can I ask the question of the woman from Ethiopia? Did I understand you to say that women coming from Africa are asked by customs agents whether they've been circumcised?
They're not only from Ethiopia, yes, from Africa, certain countries, certain hijabis, for example, coming from Sudan. So sometimes what happened, it does happen. Some of the young women was taken home. Some culture tends to, honor the family, especially if she's the only girl. They do practice. They take them home for the vacation time, so it would be cut uncircumcised. That happened. However, there's also false accusation. We involve few. Some young women, they tend to blame the family, or for whatever reason they say they've been cut, they've been circumcised. And so we have to go investigate, and we got involved, make sure the school got involved. Sometimes, most of the time, it's false. For that reason, at the airport, when the young women come back from the vacation from Africa, it could be from Asia as well, but certain profile get pulled on the side and ask, were you being asked to be circumcised? Were you being cut? Those are the kind of thing. But so our message is, let's work together. Let's raise awareness. It's forbidden in the United States. Oh, put the sign that, FGM is forbidden in the United States. Because that would create a problem within the community, not only that, within the family, which they did, because false accusation. So that's why we step in and just be mediator to the community and also the public agency.
But I guess the question I'm asking is, if they're coming from Africa and
Originally, they're from here.
yeah,
They're
they go
born
back
here, they go to the,
Africa, and
yeah.
come to the United States. They're not getting circumcised in the United States, so I guess I don't understand.
Even if they're there, the family has to be,
The family.
charged. Whoever, take them over there and have it done. So that's the reason, yeah. Thea, you want to say something?
I just want to add to what you are saying for the gentleman. It's called Operation Limelight. And it is born of the operation that took place in Heathrow, which was called the Spoon.
Yeah.
You want, we can give you a mic, we can share
As
microphones here,
my
sorry,
colleague,
just so you can
the
hear
chair
us.
of FGM
Yeah,
task force.
The gentleman, where are we? It's born out of, it's called the Limelight Operation.
And it's born out of the idea that happened, the instance that happened in Heathrow Airport, which was called the spoon operation. So basically, it's we call it navigating bias. There is a concept of the practice that those who are living in the United States who have come here as first generation and have their children would, by choice, want to continue the practice, and they would take them for what we call vacation cutting to their countries. If that stops, then there's a possibility that the cutter would come to the United States.
Mhm.
So what has happened is HSI, which is Homeland Security Investigations, has decided to look at families, for example, going to those specific destinations, for example, Sierra Leone or Ethiopia or Egypt. And if there are 3 young or 4 young girls, to bring them forward, and it's very traumatic because what you do is the family actually has boarding passes, and you're in your lounge ready to get into your flight, and then they separate the girls from the parents. And then they compare the questions. And can you imagine the trauma on these young girls? To be pulled up by an agent or the parent and not knowing what is going on. So this is what we are, Senait and our task force goes forward and talks to them about navigating bias and rewiring the mind. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mayor?
I can talk out loud.
Okay, there you go.
This is also for Senait. I wanted to ask more about the FGM task force aside from the vacation cutting, because I know that it still does happen within the U.S. So I'm wondering, do you have cases where women come up to you or girls come up to you and to the organization? And if so, like how many are there that may come and say like this is happening within the U.S. or that's happened to them within the U.S.?
Yeah, one of the task force member is the officer with Department of Homeland Security. She's one of the founders, so she had some data. I'm sorry, I don't have the data. Yes, it does exist, but as far as us, the task force, we encountered few, but it was founded untrue. There's young girls accused the mother, like, I guess they didn't like the stepfather, so they accused that they were taken and got cut, so we investigated. We do work with gynecologists who's working with FGM victims. You remember, and also FGM is one of the immigration status. If someone has that FGM cut something, they can apply for asylum. That's one of the immigration case to get the status. So we do have a lot of FGM cases coming from that. So we have an attorney, work with them closely, we work, address the issue. So yeah, we have the data. Recently, it's everywhere. But so that's how we identify who's practicing here in the United States, be able to get caught or something, or report for DHS. But as far as this task force, mainly what we do, if there is any suspicious or accusation, we get involved. We talk to the parents, we do investigate, we do assess. More so, people who are already for real get caught when they were back home. We provide mental health services and attorneys, so they would talk to, because sometimes they're ashamed to talk about their own, experience going under that ritual. It's really difficult to get the real story. We had to take time after time after time to help them healing, to overcome the process, even if it's not United States and back home. But as far as here, there is several practice here in the United States.
My watch is dead, so do we have time for one more question? Okay, we're wrapped up.
Is there an umbrella association for all of you? So it seems like everybody is working in their own bubble, and maybe that's true or not. I don't know, because I'm not educated enough. But is there an umbrella where everyone can meet together and maybe work on the same cause together?
I might say places like this,
Okay.
you know, where we come together. I mean, seriously, I mean, these are different organizations, but we're all coming together with common cause and conversation. But, I mean, to that end, I want to leave everyone here an opportunity to sort of with a call to action, and you could answer that question as your call to action, but if you could, you know, with kind of one sentence, what you would leave the audience with before we end.
Can I just answer, not answer, but, yes, this is how we meet. Unfortunately, everybody does everything. For example, for the task force, what we've been doing is bringing the expertise in different, or advocate for the voice. We bring them as a guest and share the experience, what they do. This is one opportunity which I'm so proud. But it doesn't have to be this organization. It could be you, it could be anybody in this audience. Be part of this process. It's a human being issue, it's a social justice issue. So we don't really identify or discriminate who's doing what. It's everybody is invited. So I can call get involved is my call of action.
Well, and Jack.
Mine is more of a challenge. I would ask you to think about whether or not the work or the activism you're doing is as effective and inclusive as you think it is. If you can't even bring yourself to use gender neutral language when talking about reproductive health or abortion access.
Yeah, in the spirit of this film event this evening, I want to suggest that we tell our stories, that we listen to each other's stories, that we respect all stories, and that carrying our stories with us, we create change together.
So I would say listen to Black women, learn from the experiences and the stories that are being told, act, advocate, and empower.
I would like to say, basically just talk about periods. Don't be ashamed. Don't be afraid. And one thing that I wish that everybody would be is that we would all women or all menstruating people have access to hygiene products that we need. And I think that's one of the biggest things. Just to even have just that thing to take care of the needs of your body.
Being at USC sometimes they're free, sometimes they're not. Sometimes you have a quarter, sometimes you don't. Anyway, on that note, thank you to Engender Health and Women's Voices Now and all the esteemed panelists and your, for being here and being part of this conversation that's transcending continents and cultures and reinforcing our shared commitment to advancing rights, health, and equity worldwide.
And thank you, Tracy, for moderating such a robust panel. We had to get a lot in there in a very little bit of time. So I hope that your curiosity was piqued tonight and that you want to learn more about Black Women for Wellness and the African Coalition and about Jack's work with We Testify. And Jack, you didn't say where exactly you're working, so maybe you'll let us know that in a follow-up email to everyone so that we can find out more about the work you're doing now and about Engender Health and watch more films that Celeste and her Girls Voices Now cohorts created in 2018 and beyond. And on behalf of Women's Voices Now, thank you to Engender Health and to Jennifer. It's been a pleasure working with you and coming together tonight. If you enjoyed what we experienced here, make sure to sign up for our email list, consider making donations, talk to us about other ideas, other topics you're interested in, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event, either in Los Angeles or elsewhere. And get home safely.